The restaurant was quiet, the air thick with tension, as a black waiter approached a table occupied by a wealthy, well-dressed man. He greeted him in perfect German, his voice calm, his eyes betraying nothing. But the customer's face, twisted in disdain, told a different story. In that moment, everything changed. What followed would make this man question everything he thought he knew about the world around him. Why did one simple act of speaking a different language spark such hatred? And what did it take for this man to leave a note that would leave everyone stunned? Stay with us, because what happens next might just shock you. His name was Jamal, a young man who had always prided himself on his work ethic. At 25, he'd already earned the respect of his colleagues at the high-end restaurant, a place where the city's elite dined in luxury. He was known for his kindness, his perfect English, and his impeccable service. To the regulars, Jamal was a familiar face, always smiling, always polite, blending into the polished atmosphere of the upscale eatery. But there was something more beneath the surface. As a black man in a predominantly white world, Jamal had faced challenges most couldn't imagine. He worked harder, smiled more, always pushed to be better, to prove himself worthy of the same respect others took for granted. He'd learned early that to survive, he had to be perfect. It was a Thursday evening when a man walked into the restaurant. A wealthy businessman who often dined alone, his demeanor exuding arrogance. He was seated in Jamal's section. The usual. Chatter and laughter filled the air, but Jamal felt an unsettling stillness as he approached the table. As he greeted the man, something in the air shifted, a glance, a hesitation. The customer's eyes hardened. Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. This night, like many others, would turn into a defining moment. A line that once crossed could never be uncrossed. What Jamal didn't know yet was that this was no ordinary night. Something was about to happen that would test him and the world around him in ways no one could have predicted. As Jamal placed the menu in front of the man, his smile flickered for just a moment. The man's eyes never left him, and there was something unsettling in the way he scrutinized Jamal. At first, Jamal brushed it off. It was just another customer, nothing he hadn't dealt with before. But when he returned to take the drink order, it became clear that this man wasn't like the others. "Isn't it hard for you?" the man asked, his voice barely a whisper, but sharp with intent. Jamal paused, unsure if he had heard correctly. The man leaned back, crossing his arms, eyes never leaving Jamal's face. "Hard for me to what?" Jamal asked, keeping his tone neutral, masking the unease rising in his chest. The man chuckled darkly. "To work here, with, well, people like me." His eyes scanned the room, gesturing subtly at the mostly white patrons. "Don't you think it's, beneath you?" Jamal felt his stomach churn. He had faced prejudice before, but this was different. This was blatant. He could feel the sting of the man's words burning through him. He took a deep breath, forcing his professionalism to take over. "Sir, I'm just here to ensure you have a pleasant dining experience." The man's lips curled into a smirk. "You speak perfect English. For someone like you." His words hung in the air, thick and poisonous, and Jamal's pulse quickened. He had heard that phrase before. For someone like you. It was the kind of remark that cut deep, an accusation wrapped in a backhanded compliment. The kind that insinuated he didn't belong, that his very presence was out of place. Jamal's heart pounded. He had no choice but to keep his composure, to continue serving. But every word from this man felt like a slap. As he moved to pour the wine, he caught sight of the man's watch. Expensive, probably worth more than Jamal's entire paycheck, and then his eyes darted back to the man's face. Something shifted in the air. The man's tone was colder now, almost threatening. "I know people like you. I can make life a lot easier for you, you know," he said, his words carrying a weight Jamal couldn't ignore. "But you'll need to understand your place." See, weight of the man's words pressed down on Jamal's chest, suffocating him. He had never been so close to someone who was so openly racist, so blatant in their hatred. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a personal attack, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. Jamal's mind raced. He had been trained to stay calm, to never let emotions cloud his judgment. But today, everything was different. This man wasn't just a customer. He was a symbol of everything Jamal had ever fought against. Every time he had fought to be seen as equal, to be seen as human, it was as though this man was here to crush it all underfoot. "Your order will be ready in a few minutes," Jamal said, his voice strained as he forced a smile. But before he could turn away, the man dropped a $100 bill onto the table. It was a tip, but it wasn't a kind one. It felt more like a bribe, a reminder of his wealth and power, thrown at Jamal as if he were less than human. Jamal took a step back, his hands shaking. He turned away, fighting to keep his anger from spilling out. But as he reached the kitchen, the full weight of the situation hit him all at once. His hands were still trembling as he handed the bill to the cashier. "Something's wrong with this guy," Jamal muttered. But the cashier didn't answer. Instead, they just nodded, their eyes filled with pity. The night dragged on, and Jamal could feel the man's eyes following him wherever he went, waiting for him to mess up, to falter. He had seen it before, a white customer expecting the black waiter to be less than, to fail. And for some reason, it was as if the man was waiting for Jamal to prove him right. When Jamal finally delivered the check, he took a deep breath. It was time to move on, to survive this night. But the man didn't just take the check. He looked up, locking eyes with Jamal, and then something shocking happened. The man stood up, tossed his napkin on the table, and walked out without a word, leaving his full meal untouched. And there, sitting on the table, was a ticket and a note. Jamal's stomach dropped. He slowly walked over, his heart pounding as he picked up the note. What he saw next would leave him speechless, and just like that, the man was gone. Jamal stood, frozen, staring at the note in his hand, his mind racing. What had just happened? Jamal's hands trembled as he stared at the note left by the man. He turned it over, and his heart sank as he read the words, each one like a dagger to his chest. "You're a good waiter, but let's be real. You'll never fit in here. People, like you don't belong in places like this. Maybe you should know your place." He stared at the note, his eyes welling with tears he'd been fighting to hold back all night. The restaurant around him blurred into the background as he stood frozen, the weight of those words suffocating him. The voice of his own thoughts screamed at him, "Why? Why now? Why me?" For a moment he felt like a child again, powerless, like those countless times in his life when he'd been told he wasn't enough, when people had treated him like he didn't matter. But this was different. This wasn't just any random encounter. This was a rejection of everything Jamal had worked for, a slap in the face of his dignity, his humanity. He felt the rage building inside him, a burning fire threatening to explode, but at the same time he felt utterly powerless. There was no way he could fight back in this environment, not without losing his job, not without risking everything he'd worked so hard for. Jamal looked around. The other servers moved in a blur, laughing, working, oblivious to the storm swirling, inside him. It felt like he was in a different world. The restaurant, which had always felt like a second home, now felt like a prison. He had always told himself that he was here to rise above, to prove that he could do it, no matter what people thought. But tonight, those words on that note shattered that illusion. He slowly crumpled the note in his hand, a burning mix of anger and defeat pulsing through his veins. He wanted to scream, to throw something, to make the man pay for his words. But he knew he couldn't. Not here. Not now. And as he stood there, caught between his rage and helplessness, he realized something. He could never go back to the way things were. The restaurant was no longer just a job. It was a constant reminder of how far he still had to go, how much more he had to fight. But there was still a choice to make. He could let this moment define him, or he could take it and rise above it. The note was gone. But the battle was far from over. Jamal stood there for what felt like an eternity, crumpled note in hand, his emotions swirling in a chaotic storm of anger, shame, and hurt. But then something inside him shifted. He took a deep breath, pushing back the overwhelming wave of defeat. "I'm not broken," he told himself. "I won't let this define me." The following days at the restaurant were harder than ever. But Jamal kept his head high. He didn't respond to the man's note. Instead, he focused on the customers who respected him, who saw him for the hard worker he was, not the color of his skin. Slowly, the sting of that encounter faded. The pain was still there, but it didn't have the power to control him anymore. One evening, a regular customer, a woman who always greeted him with kindness, noticed the change in his demeanor. She asked him what happened. Jamal hesitated, but then opened up. "I've been told I'm not enough, that I'll never belong." The woman's response was simple yet powerful. "The world doesn't define your worth, Jamal. You do. And those who judge you, those who can't see past their own biases don't matter." Her words hit him like a revelation. He realized that this man's cruelty wasn't about him. It was about the ignorance and hate he chose to carry. Jamal couldn't change people's hearts, but he could control his own. And he would not let that hate poison him. In the weeks that followed, Jamal took that energy, his pain, his anger, and used it as fuel to prove everyone wrong. He started speaking out when he saw injustice, whether it was in the restaurant or beyond. He realized his fight wasn't just for respect. It was for the recognition of his humanity. The story of that night, the note, and the customer's cold words, those moments would always be a part of him. But they didn't define him. He chose to rise. And in doing so, Jamal became a voice for those who felt invisible, for anyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. As Jamal walked out of that restaurant one final time, the question lingered in his mind. How many more people are out there like me carrying that same weight? The fight isn't over. It never was. And we all have a part to play. What will you do to be part of the change?